Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business.
What up, y'all? Welcome to a bonus episode of Hip Hop Now Podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts, but specifically right now on YouTube at Hip Hop Pod. We're on a journey past 500 subscribers right now. We're flirting with 700, which is good. You know, I'm in the algorithm and all that, so that's what's up. But it's the journey to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to help a brother out, get it within that algorithm a little bit better because you like the content, not because I told you to, hit that like button, subscribe, and more importantly, share with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Now, we have a very, very, very special episode. Y'all know I don't even do interviews. I did it when I was younger. And trust me, when you're doing hip hop interviews, a lot of times you almost got to fight and all kinds of craziness. So when I started my podcast, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do something different as far as news and putting people on. And this is one of those episodes. And I'm going to break from not doing interviews because there's a special brother here with us, a special book, and a special group with a special place in hip hop. The book is called High and Rising, the book about De La Soul. And my guest is Marcus J. Moore. What's good, brother?
What's going on, man? How you feeling?
Can't complain, man. You the superstar though. You the man right now. Just dropped your album.
Man, I'm doing what I can, man. I appreciate all the good vibes so far.
Yeah, no doubt. Well deserved as well. So we're just gonna start from the beginning because obviously, in this case, I'm saying obviously because I know you are a hip hop head. And a lot of people like to ask the question, you know, like, when did you first fall in love with hip hop? As a hip hop head, I hate that question. I ain't gonna lie. I'm from Brooklyn, New York. It's a little bit deeper for me, but I feel like a better question for a hip hop head is, you know, obviously where you're originally from. You could tell us about that, but also, what was your first hip hop experience? Whether that's hearing a song and liking it, an album, a dance, clothing, you know, where does the story with hip hop begin for you?
I think the story begins for me with my cousin Eric, who was a DJ. My cousin Eric Hart, who he was 11 years older than me. Originally, I'm to go back and answer your question. I'm from Prince George's County, Maryland, Landover, Maryland specifically. And so I grew up with my cousin Eric and other older cousins who, they were into hip hop and they knew of it from the very, very beginning,
Right.
So my cousin, I remember he spent time in LA and throughout California. And I want to say it was maybe 1988, possibly 87, when he comes back and he tells me, my cousin Isaac, and my cousin Tiffany, he was like, yo, there's this dude out in Cali named MC Hammer that's making some noise. Like, y'all might want to pay attention. And I remember we laughed him out. We were like, what? Like, who? Nah, I don't think this dude's going to make any noise. Like, I don't know about this here, bro. And he was like, okay, watch what I tell you. And Lord knows, like, I want to say it was maybe like even like a month or two later, he comes out with Let's Get It Started. Everybody goes crazy. His videos all over the place. So that for me is my lasting like first memory, but also, alongside with that memory, my cousin Eric was very liberal about his vinyl. So, I mean, he was a professional DJ, but he would let me just kind of like go through the records and, look at stuff. So I'm looking at like the Ice-T Power album cover, which is a crazy cover. Like when you flip it over, you're like, oh, all right.
Right.
You're like, okay, cool. All right, I see you. And then also like EPMD, stuff like that. So yeah, hip hop for me began with my family, and quite frankly, that's why I wanted to shout them out as much as I could in this book that just came out.
Right. And what I like about what you said, I like the fact that it's unique, that it involves MC Hammer, who, if you look at the Cliff Notes, he's almost like a polarizing figure, but people forget about Let's Get It Started. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't what he's kind of been known for. It was more in that hip hop lane, more aggressive in the styles of DLC and LL, just like, attacking the beat, as opposed to what people think he was based off of what his later work, basically. So I thought that was dope that you mentioned that. And and your cousin being like, "Yo, you better watch out." Like,
Yeah, and us laughing him out, being like, "Nah, man, that's not. Man, this dude
right,
ain't Boogie Down Productions. This ain't Public Enemy. What you talking about? I'm trying to
right,
play this LL." And he's like, "All
right.
right, watch what I tell you." And sure enough, blew up.
Yeah, it's crazy. Um, so I guess with that being said, what I think about, your first book was about Kendrick Lamar, which was dope. And obviously, people who don't know, definitely go check that one out as well. But what was it that made you decide to write a book about De La Soul specifically? And why do you think it's important, for something like this to be available now in 2024?
Well, that's I'm glad that you asked that question, man, because one of my biggest fears when this book was coming out, I was like, am I gonna have to let people know that I wasn't doing it to, to chase any sort of legacy, or I wasn't doing it to cash in on
Right,
grief. I wasn't trying to do that because obviously Dave from De La Soul passed away in
right.
2023. So, but no, my focus with this book was the same with Kendrick, where these are big names, right? Like Kendrick Lamar is arguably, well, he's easily one of the greatest rappers of all time already.
Right.
De La Soul, arguably the greatest rap group of all time, depending on who you talk to. They don't need my cosign by any means, but as a fan and also as a Black author,
Mhm.
it's important to be telling the stories of Black genius in the literary space, because it's like I've been saying a bunch of times, where you can read the same book over and over. You can read books on Miles Davis forever. You can read books on John Coltrane forever, Bruce Springsteen, the Beatles, all of these people. You can read these books a million times. Like they will cut these stories so many different ways. Whereas
Mhm.
I'm always on the other side saying, okay, that's good, but I feel like when we do that, we underestimate the intelligence of the reader, and I never want to do that in anything, in any article I write, any show that I curate, any book that I write. I wanted to give people the book that they didn't know that they needed. You know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? So that's what I did with Kendrick, where I'm like, and I heard the chirping from, like, certain cats who are like, oh, it's too soon, until 5 years later when he decides to end Drake. Then it's like, oh damn,
Right.
okay, this book that came out 5 years ago predicted all of this stuff. It's like, I told y'all.
Mhm.
So same thing with Daylight, where it's like, quite honestly, man, as cliche as it may sound, I just really wanted to celebrate one of my favorite groups ever in the literary space, because, yo, man, with me in particular, De La Soul kind of showed people like myself and probably all kinds of Black men that it's
Mhm.
okay to show love. It's okay for Black men to tell other Black men that they love them. It's okay to hug your brother. It's okay to be vulnerable, to express your feelings, and not always have a scowl on your face.
Right.
So De La Soul to me was the most relatable group when I was a kid, because as much as I loved the LLs and the Rakims and people like that, Public Enemy, and I still love that music, De La Soul to me felt the most attainable, because I tended to dress like them. I wanted to have crazy haircuts like them. And with Daylight, it's like they're legends, and you would see articles here and there over the years, but nothing that encapsulated everything that we love about the group. So I wanted to write a book that spoke to us, quite honestly. I wasn't necessarily trying to talk to the person who doesn't really care about this music or Daylight in the first place. I wanted to talk to folks like you,
Mhm.
folks like our homie Angelica, folks who like grew up with the music and
Right.
can identify with it.
Yeah, that's dope because you know, obviously I was going to go there as well. For those who don't know, who are thinking about picking up this book, one of the things I like about it, and you just pointed it out, is the fact that it's not just about De La Soul, it's also about being a fan of De La Soul and being a young black man growing with this group. And I thought, when you told me about the idea originally, and I thought that was a dope idea because I've done things like that. I've thought about things like that as a fan, and it's not like you want to read about De La Soul and you want to skip the parts about Marcus. The parts about Marcus is us. You're the mirror, you're the fan, you're the person who absorbed the music in either same ways or whatever kind of ways, but you're the relatable character in the story, the guide, so to speak. And I think that in a lot of ways, you revealed a couple of things that I didn't know. Some things I did about De La Soul, but a couple of things I didn't know that played out into themes for me about De La Soul that I didn't realize were there. Now, some of those themes may be very controversial for the hip hop heads because we know y'all like to argue, you know what I'm saying, over the different, who's here and what. But considering what you wrote and you pointed out what I was already thinking about the group, some of those themes include, and I'm be a straight shooter with it. Um, De La Soul was like against the grain from day one, and having listened to the entire catalog recently, that's a theme on every album. We are not them kind of thing. Now, you alluded to it and you straight up said it, not even alluded to, but you said it in your book, how that can be perceived as haters, like a career of hating on the other side or those who are different from them. But the other theme that most people don't realize that De La has always said, but it took Little Sean to say it recently for people to be like, what? Is that De La Soul will whoop your ass also. And I didn't realize a lot of these different things were even in 3 Feet High and Rising. What do you what like obviously, there's some things that you can relate to that you express, but what do you think about the whole idea of, being the alternative to what's popular throughout the history of hip hop? Because where they started, we were a little bit more accepting of everything in 88 and all of that. But then
Mhm.
obviously in the 90s, you start to get this split. What do you think about that whole history with De La, but also you as a hip hop
Yeah, man. I feel like that's the only way to be, quite honestly, because it's like I always say to people, dare to be different, and that's what I've been telling people about this book as well. It's like De La Soul dared to be different.
fan? Okay.
Um, and the reason why I always give that advice, and the reason why I think it applies to De La and to, the best hip hop that we hold dear, is that if you think about it over the years, all of our favorite groups or people were different in a way. You know
Mm,
what I mean? So whether it's De La Soul, whether it's Public Enemy, whether it's Wu-Tang Clan, they were all like they didn't fit into what somebody else is doing. They stood alone.
okay.
And to answer the first or one part of your question, it's like I've always governed myself that way because that's just how I naturally am. Like if
Mm,
everybody's running over here, if everybody's running over here to get some Jordans, let me get the shoes nobody has. I've
mhm,
been that way since a kid. Like I'm gonna get these cool joints because I'm gonna get these Tim Hardaways because everybody got the Jordans, kind of
right.
thing. You
Right.
know what I mean? So, but here's the thing about that, right? And I don't know if this probably doesn't apply to De La as much because they were superstars out of the gate. But
Mhm,
like at least for me, it was a lonely road for a long time. It's been a lonely road probably for a decade where if everybody wanted to cover the Kanyes and the Drakes and all of that stuff, I knew that my voice wasn't going to fit there
mm,
because everybody was doing that. Give me the weird gospel disco record that only has like 3 listeners. You know what I'm saying? Give me the weird like metal, techno, whatever. Give me
mm,
that because I can write about that too. So I don't know. I feel like it's always best in any circumstance to just kind of follow your gut, just trust your gut. And if you're into weird music or if you're into something that's considered left of center,
Right.
you owe it to yourself to go down that road because quite frankly, that's how you stick around, and it may be one of those things where folks may not understand where you're coming from for a long time. But one day you'll look up and you'll notice there are like, okay, there are a few more people there paying attention. At least that's what it's been like for me, where for a while I felt like I was talking to myself, like in the early
Right.
days, I'm like, oh, y'all don't like Thundercat? Okay, I'm gonna keep. And then
Right.
you look up and it's like, oh, snap, all of y'all are fooling with this. All right, great.
Right.
Um, and I think within the context of hip hop, I think a prime example of that is Billy Woods,
Mm.
because Woods would always talk about how for like 20 years, like he's been making great music for like 20 years. And
Mm.
then all of a sudden one day he looks up and he's at a festival and it's all these white kids in the lawn, on the lawn, watching him rap.
Right. Right.
So same deal with De La, man. Like you just gotta dare to be different and just hope and know that your music is gonna stand the test of time if it's done well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and definitely well put. It kind of leads to another question. And again, shout out the homie Angelica. When we were talking about Dayline, and one of her observations was um, Dayline's not really seen as a conscious hip hop group. Most people don't think of them that way because they're not Public Enemy. They're not in they don't create it in a Public Enemy kind of way or NWA kind of way that's more forceful. It's more casual, but it has the same power behind it. Do you think that was a attraction for you just in general as a young black kid?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, I don't always want people shouting at me all the time. Like I came up, we came up in the same era where it was like, look, the upbringing was a little harder. Like, you're gonna
Right.
get some real talk, and you can't be afraid of the real talk. But that doesn't necessarily mean I always want to be fighting the power. Sometimes I need somebody to just kind of put the arm around the shoulder and be like, hey, you know what you did back there was messed up, right? Like, still love you, but don't do that again. It's like, okay, that resonates, and that's how kind of like Daylight felt to me, where it's like, yo, we're gonna let you know that what you doing is whack. Like, don't do
Right.
that again, though. Like, we love you, but don't do that again. So
Right. Right.
yeah, so that's how it resonated with me, and I think you guys are right when you're talking about it. Like, they said all the things. They had records that were very honest. Like, my mind goes to the song "My Brother's a Basshead," where Paz is talking about his brother. Another song like Dave's opening salvo on "Stakes is High." The song "Stakes is High," where he's like, "I'm sick of everything. I hate it
Right.
all." He's just kind of saying it.
Right.
But even in that moment, you don't feel like, oh wow, okay, he's just bitter. He's just being honest. Um,
Right.
so yeah, no, I would never label De La Soul a conscious group because they could do all the things. But I've always appreciated, just as a young black kid, how I could take lessons from them, but not feel like I'm being scolded.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it because I think I never even thought about that for some of the same reasons. I always felt like their music had a certain level of entertainment to it. And sometimes, especially as a kid, the messages would go over my head because I wasn't there yet.
Yeah,
And even with Stakes is High, where I was like, just to soapbox a little bit for y'all. Uh, Around that time, like 96 or whatever, it was real divisive in hip hop, like big time. It was a big divide. And I was always a fan of De La and J. Rue the Damager. And I felt like they were beneath the finger pointing because I felt like their music was so great in itself, it would tell people who wanted the same formula of shiny suit stuff that this is still great. But I think the minute more J. Rue the Damager than anything, the more he started to say, don't do that over there, the more those people felt offended by him. But he was pretty dope, and the album's dope. Wrath of Math is the album. Um, did you at any point on some hip hop stuff feel like, because we know what age we live in, the social media age where everything is a hot take. And, were you afraid that, or are you afraid that some people in today's age will only look at that argument and feel like you're choosing a side or another, even though you point out both sides?
Well, I can acknowledge that something like that's probably going to happen from certain readers, but also try to govern myself and know that, look, it's just somebody's opinion. I can't control it, I've definitely been working on myself in that regard and just like not worrying about what somebody on the internet's going to say, because I mean, everybody has an opinion, like you said. Like everybody feels like they could say something because they have a screen name and they got a Twitter account or X account or whatever. They could just say whatever. So
Right.
I don't know. I've learned. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this is a wild leap, but I've learned over the past year, as life was happening in a real way, to not really take light stuff seriously. Like I've learned to take the serious stuff seriously and let
Right.
everything else be what it's going to be. So it's like if somebody just wants to argue about some hip hop on the internet, like I'll go a couple of rounds and after a while I'll just be like, you got it. You
Right.
got it. Cause it's like you dug in. You dug into how you feel. So there's
Right.
nothing I can say. So I just gotta let it happen. Whereas when it's time to like talk about something serious, if we're talking seriously about hip hop or about the book or De La Soul, then yeah, let's talk seriously. But I had a brief example of that this week. Like there was an article that came out. I don't know if you read it,
Hmm.
but the Atlantic covered. They kind of covered the book, but they sort of used my book as a jumping off point. The writer did to say how he thought De La Soul is Dead was a terrible album or it was a bad album or a misstep or
Did
whatever.
see that.
You
Yeah.
see that? And it was just like, okay, that was kind of weird. Like, I could understand if he read the book and it was just like, all right, I'm just gonna review it straight up.
Right.
But to use it as a jumping off point to just kind of get off a hot take to say like this record isn't as good as 3 Feet High and Rising because it doesn't sample Hall and Oates and Steely Dan. Like that's just to
Right.
me that's silly. And that's just I say that to say that's an example of somebody on the internet just doing things and saying stuff, and I can't really worry about it.
Yeah, and knowing the space you're in that I'm not in, so I'm gonna say it. So they could, I'll take the beef, whatever. But we all know there are a number of organizations, not just when it comes to the written works, and it comes to the sports world. Also, we see it all the time. Who have learned that hot takes equal eyes and ears and clicks and stuff like that. So if you could write about something, but also do the same justice of getting it to go viral, so to speak, because now everybody's arguing about it online, they'll take those dives into it. Because what's weird about that to me is when you read the first couple of chapters of your book, if not the first couple of pages between 3 Feet High and Rising and De La Soul is Dead, it is explained why they did what they did and what the talk was about them making that change from a fan perspective, but also media, people who didn't like it, who had those same takes. And it's almost like a dead issue that was solved years ago, when De La only had two albums. So I agree with you. It just seems like something that, like you're just bringing up an old argument to bring it up because you think we're too old to remember. Right.
Yeah, it was just kind of written. It seemed like it was from the perspective of a person that wasn't outside, right? And look, in full disclosure, I can't sit here and act like I was outside. I was
Right.
10, but I've also been a music nerd since I was like 5. So I totally
Right.
remember it. I remember all of that. And yeah, no, like I read that and I was like, okay, that's cute, but no,
Right. Right.
that's not true at all.
Yeah. Um, so I guess from a personal standpoint for you, how does it feel to write about your heroes in general? Because I know you had a mission, but if the 10-year-old you knew you would be doing this with this amount of attention on it, how does that make you feel, knowing that?
Brother, man, I'm gonna be super honest with you, and I've made it a point to be vulnerable in public. I'm of two different minds on this. Like
Okay.
the 10-year-old me is freaking out. You know what I'm saying? Because just like I'm always gonna count myself as a fan of
Mhm.
musicians, of music, of art. Like I have a lot of musician buddies, as we probably both do. And I tell them all the time, like I revere musicians. What you guys do is beyond. Like you can read music, you can read something on a page and then translate it to sound. Like that's crazy to me, just as a fan. So I love the fact that I can contextualize those things.
Right.
But I'm also on the other side where it's like it's tough to be the first to do anything if I can, be honest, man, where like the first Kendrick book, it's like this like, uh-oh, what's this about? Like there's a misunderstanding. Like anytime people read the first book on anyone, either the artist or the fans around the artist, or quite frankly, the sort of middlemen around these people
Mhm.
will do anything possible to try to vilify you because they just kind of feel like, okay, the artist didn't do it, so therefore it's not viable,
Right.
therefore it's not important. And whereas I'm on the other side, like, okay, look, I'm a creative writer, and I feel like there is a certain segment of the population that doesn't respect creative writing. And I always want to push against that. It's like creative writing is creativity. It's right there in the title.
Mhm.
Um, so I'm not saying that like, I totally had a tough time, but there were tough moments with this book and Kendrick where it's just like it defies some comprehension sometime when you just try to hit people and say, hey, I'm writing this out of love. Obviously there are going to be critical aspects of it, but it's going to be a fair book, and I'm writing out of a sense of love. Like certain people just can't understand that.
Mhm.
So yeah, like I feel like I say all that to say, and I know I'm all over the place, but I feel like certain times, publicly, I take a lot of bullets for the culture that I try to uphold, and it's frustrating.
Mhm.
Um, even within the scope of like, I don't remember if you saw not too long ago, where Punch from TDE, the president of TDE, was just like, the reason why rappers don't want to talk to writers because a lot of y'all are garbage or whatever.
Yeah, I did see that.
You
Yeah.
saw that, and I felt the way because I'm just like, yo, man, we do a lot to uphold, especially black writers, man. We do a lot to uphold black content creators, everything. We're trying to uphold the same culture that we love, and but to be vilified by the people we're trying to shout out can get a little old, man.
Right.
So right now the love is palpable, but I can't even act like I can fully enjoy it because I'm just so trained to expect the other shoe to drop that I'm like, all right, like I kind of am cautiously optimistic right now.
Yeah, I totally feel that. And I also think, and I guess, I'm asking you, do you think something like what Punch said probably has more to do with the hot take culture of they call themselves journalists, but I don't call them journalists because I know journalists. But the content creators, the influencers, the other podcasts where um, they don't necessarily, and not just podcasts, there are a couple of publications also where they're looking for the hot take, they're looking for the controversy, even if it's coming at them. So they kind of clump you into that category of people covering this content, even though you cover this content with more integrity. Do you think that kind of gets in the way?
Yeah, it definitely gets in the way, man. I feel like to your point, we're at this place now where people confuse journalism with just, straight up content creation, where
Mm.
like you said, it's all about the hot take, it's all about saying something wild to get people to, subscribe.
Right,
Whereas I mean a lot of our homies are like legit journalists where they're going to have the tough conversation, but they're also going to shout you out. They're also going to celebrate you if they need to be celebrating you. You know what I'm
right,
saying? And when I read that, I just kind of was like, the old me probably would have felt the way and would have been in my little feelings or whatever. But currently I was just like, okay, well, he's just confused because the game is so messed up right now that he just doesn't even know who a hip hop journalist really is. But I also got to hold musicians' feet to the fire on this as a person who's gone through this the past few years, where a lot of musicians, I can't say a lot, I'll take that back. Some musicians expect us to be free publicists,
Mm,
and they don't want any sort of critical discourse at all. They just expect us to be happy that we're sitting across from them at some swanky hotel in Soho, and that
right.
we're just supposed to ask easy questions, and they don't want to have any sort of honest discourse, anything that sort of reveals anything about themselves, because they want to keep a lot of things secret, and so that's why they talk to their friends.
Hmm.
That's why Kendrick talked to SZA. That they're gonna it's gonna be an easy conversation with somebody that they know, and they don't want to have a serious, honest, thoughtful conversation with somebody they don't know who maybe they respect. So I
Right.
got to hold musicians, the whole the relationship right now between musicians and writers, I feel like is at an all-time low, because no matter how positive you may be within, like, let's just say 1,000 words, if you're critical in even one part of it, they're
Hmm.
throwing the whole thing away and they're calling it a bad review or whatever. So, um, we have a lot of musicians who are afraid of honesty, and they just want to keep the PR cycle going.
That's one of the things I liked about your book, because that's why we are here, people, right? Uh, but all of this relates. But it's one of the things I liked about your book because I never really realized, Stakes is High came out. I was like, oh, De La Soul got take issue with certain things, but I didn't realize they've always pointed out those things throughout their history, and you didn't necessarily just say, "This is my group. I side with them." Whatever with the other side. You decide to point out a couple of things where it's like, I love them, but here they doing a little finger pointing, and they had done this with me, myself, and I. So I really uh, enjoyed that part because as a hip hop head, I'm already on the edge reading like, okay, he called them out. Okay, cool, cool, cool. Because I was thinking it, you know what I'm saying? But to read it as I'm thinking, it's like, cool. He again, as a journalist, he's paying attention to every single detail of the conversation, and it's not necessarily as a critic, but as a fan of the group to point out the things that some may see as flaws. Um, but I got a couple more questions. But people love De La Soul. Obviously, when the music hit streaming services, it was like De La Soul Day. It was just really dope to see. Like I just didn't know this many people love De La. What do you think it is about De La Soul versus some of their peers who some may argue are more revered? What is it about De La Soul that people love?
I feel like it's just people love them as people. You know what I mean? I think there's something to be said about your name not being dirty in the streets. Like, it's this weird sort of like cosmic thing. I don't even know what to call it, but it's like I talked to a lot of different people and from a lot of different communities for this book. Even if they didn't land in the book, I
Mhm.
just talked to a lot of people about De La Soul, and folks who knew them, like their longtime publicists and et cetera, et cetera. And
Right.
all of them were saying, like, look, nobody's perfect, but Paz and Maceo and Dave are just really good dudes. They're
Mhm.
just really nice. They'll give you the time of day. Um, you know, they don't stand for anything. They're not going to stand for any foolishness. But if you run up on them and just be like, "Yo, I'm a huge fan," they'll give you time.
Right.
So I think there's something to be said about that, man. But also, like, I feel like it's the joy that comes from the music. It's the
Right.
joy, it's the honesty, it's the creative ingenuity. Because the thing I appreciate about De La is like no album sounds the same.
Mhm.
3 Feet High and Rising sounds nothing like De La Soul is Dead, but sounds nothing like Balloon Mind State, Stakes is High, etc.
Right.
So I think there's something to be said about like, yo, if you got a crazy idea, you just got to go forward with it and just see it all the way through. Because if the idea is in your head, and I tell people this like near and far, like I tell loved ones this, I tell students this, everything. If the idea is on your head, you owe it to yourself to see it through to the end. Like if you see it through to the end and it doesn't work, then delete it. But don't talk yourself out of something that may be dope. And the thing I appreciate about De La is like, they, to me at least, it seems like they threw everything against the wall and most of it stuck. And the fact that, in 2023, when this music comes back out, despite it being over 30 years old, it still holds up because even if you don't love the music, you can still appreciate the joy and the sense of like absurdity that comes from some of it. Because I think they hit a certain part of your spirit because
Right.
the world in and of itself is incredibly serious, and Lord knows it's really serious right now.
Yeah.
They provide an escape in a way that I think resonates with like thousands and millions of people.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. It's just dope to even see this, to see so many people interested in learning more about the group through your words in your book and your experience. I have a few hip hop questions for you, so we can get in that bag real quick because you are a hip hop head. One related to or a two-part question related to De La Soul. Did you ever want a native tongue compilation? And do you have any theories on why that didn't happen? But also, they not too long ago, people talked about how the Locks been together so long, what a group, and they didn't break up, but neither did De La, and they predate the Locks. But do you think there was ever room for solos for Dave or Paz? Like, what do you think about that with the native tongue situation and then, the group itself?
First of all, I really wanted a Native Tongues compilation. I
Uh,
really, oh man, like when they were together in that Buddy video, and I was like, oh please, like I just wanted to hear how it was gonna sound with like maybe it's Pos and Mike G, maybe it's like Queen Latifah and Moni on a track, Queen Latifah and Dave on a track. Like I
Yeah,
wanted to hear how that would sound with like Prince Paul and like Pete Rock or whoever the premiere. I don't know. I wanted to hear that. But the fact that it never happened was such a bummer to me. I was like, damn. As far as theories, like I feel like to me, it was a sort of a their the fact that we never got a compilation, I think, was also because their schedules didn't align,
mm,
and I think Mike G even told me that where he was just like you know, if De La was in town, Tribe was on the road, or if Tribe was in town, they were on the road, and so it just kind of they were all passing ships in the night, and then Queen
right.
Latifah goes and starts acting, so it was just kind of one of those things. I don't think it was. No, obviously they didn't tell me because full disclosure, De La Soul didn't talk to me for the book, but
Right.
my sense that I get from talking to people wasn't that they just didn't want to do it. It was just like, we don't have time to
Yeah.
do it because, you know, and that's why the only thing we get that's even close to a compilation is Buddy. I think that might be the only native tongue song actually is
Which is
Buddy.
the craziest tease ever because it works. You know what I'm saying? Like all of them
Uh-huh.
together, that track vibing, even without the video. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, pardon my memory. There was another part of your question.
Yeah, just about the group's longevity together, but more importantly, typically, even if it's not a breakup, you get some kind of solo outing from
Yes.
group members.
Yes. 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 So, I've always wondered how a Paz solo album, how a Dave solo album would work. But yeah, I guess I don't know. I guess they just weren't interested in it, and I think they were messing around with the idea of doing some solo work. But yeah, I kind of wondered because I feel like when they were popular, um, when they were at their height, and then even in the '90s, like you would get that a lot. You would get like the most prime, the biggest example was Wu-Tang Clan, where they're the
Right,
clan. But then here's the Jizza record. Here's Ghost. Here's Ray. Here's Meth.
right.
Um, so I always wanted to hear that from people. Like, what would before they did it, before Outkast did it, it was an Outkast album, but it was a Big Boy solo and a Dre solo. I wonder how like a Paz solo record would sound, how a Dave solo record. But I don't know. I guess it's just like how do you break up peanut butter and jelly, right? Like
Yeah, because
it's
it
still
didn't
good.
always work for everybody, because we got Fife solos and Q-Tip
Woo!
solos and Guru solos and
The sticky fingers, the sticky
Sticky
fingers. So
Fingers, that Black Trash. I keep telling y'all, one of the greatest concept albums ever, because it takes a lot of concentration to hold to that concept from beginning to end, skits and all that. But whatever, that's my soapbox. But no, I'm with you. I think in a lot of ways, um, and again, credit to your book and your observations. But and maybe you don't even know you were doing this, but I thought about the solos, and then I thought about the albums in their discography where Dave took the lead on what it would sound like, and Paz, and I think it resulted in two very dope albums that were different but still felt like the group. You know what I'm saying? So, and for those who are wondering, I'm thinking Blue Mind State and maybe Stakes is High. I think I forget. I had it in my head somewhere. Another De La hip hop question for you. Your personal favorite album from De La in the discography?
oh brother, the stakes is high. It is. I'm sorry. I couldn't even think about that one. Like that one just stakes is high easily.
Right.
And it's because I felt like I'm admittedly it's nostalgia because when Stakes is High came out, I was 15. I remember it was the summer of 1996. And if you think about the summer of 1996, a lot of great records came out. I think I want to say theirs came out in June as well. Um, but the summer of 96, you get Stakes is High, you get Nas, It Was Written, which is a good record. I know a lot of people hate because it wasn't Illmatic, but It Was Written was dope.
I think it's better, but that's me. So
I can't disagree with you. I cannot disagree. We can't say that too loud though, but
right.
we can't go to Queens and say that. But like, so It Was Written. You also got Ghostface Iron Man comes out.
Yeah.
So you got all these great records. So I just remember that time, like getting all these cassettes and CDs. And I remember the It's So Easy video and just being like, yo, I want to go to this school. Like Dave is there and Lords of the Underground having a food fight, and you got Pharoah Monch in there. And
Right.
so yeah, no, Stakes is High easily.
Stakes is High,
Absolutely.
hands
Yeah.
down.
How about yours?
See, y'all journalists, y'all stay every time I interview y'all start asking me questions.
It's your show, man. You're not just
Yeah.
teeing it up, brother.
I just have a very hard time committing sometimes, especially when you have a wealth of dope music. But having listened to the discography recently, because I'm gonna do a ranking of the albums in another video, I might have to go with 3 Feet High and Rising because I was a young kid, and the skits and the colors and hearing potholes in my lawn and me, myself, and I, it just related to me on a influential level that when I hear it, of course, there's some other albums where the bars are better, the beats are more boom bap, but that one has a special place in my heart. So again, uh, hearing that back then and even listening to it now, I would probably feel comfortable saying that debut will probably always be my favorite. So
Okay. That's not a wrong answer.
yeah, but I play in this hip hop space and they'd be like, yo, so you don't like rock cocaine? Like, dog, relax. Okay. Of course I do.
That song is hard though.
Yeah, oh my God. I was listening today, like, yeah, I don't hear enough conversation about this one. This one's crazy.
Mhm.
All right, here's another one for you. And obviously, this is your personal top 5 greatest hip hop groups of all time.
Oh, my personal top 5. Okay. In ranking order or just off the top of my head?
It doesn't have to be in order,
Okay.
unless you want it to be. So.
Oh no, I ain't backing myself into that corner, brother.
Right.
I'm gonna say Public Enemy, absolutely. Like because I remember 8 years ago I randomly met Hank Shockley and I fanned out. Like I never fan out. Anybody who knows me knows I can walk past somebody like, oh, that was such and such. Oh, that's cool. All right.
Right.
But when I met Hank Shockley, I was like, Yo, what? Like, I'd have so many questions. So anyway, Public Enemy, De La Soul, A Tribe Called Quest, because I feel like, the public knows me now as like jazz guy,
Right.
jazz head cat, jazz writer. They introduced me to like jazz that was kind of off the beaten path.
Mm.
Well, I say they, but really Q-Tip, if I'm being real. Q-Tip and Ali. So I got two more. Boogie Down Productions. People
Mm.
don't talk about the edutainment record enough.
Mm.
That was a record. Like I remember playing that. Me and my cousin Ike were playing that on cassette, and we were like, "Yo, this record goes hard." You listen to a song like "The Homeless" and
Right. Right.
joints like that. You know the rules. Um, and I'm gonna say the Roots.
The Roots.
The
Okay.
Roots, yeah, because I remember like being in the DC area, I would always go to their shows. I was always at the 930 Club, lined up to get tickets. This is kids. This was before Ticketmaster online, y'all. You had to like go to the box office and stand outside in seedy areas and get a ticket.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Roots, man. I think I'm gonna round it out with
That's
them.
that's a dope list, man. And I wanted to ask personal favorites because once you start getting to the definitive lists and the algorithms start going crazy, and Marcus J. Morris says, so he leaves out who was snubbed. Not who you
Ooh.
said. Who did he snub?
Right, then Jada Kiss is atting me like, "Yo, man, you ain't talking about the locks, man."
Right, right,
Oh,
right.
come on, man.
Um, before I ask you this final question, I just want to shout out the design of this book, the artwork, because again, as a person who loves 3 Feet High and Rising and Daylight, and even what they've been doing to promote their music being on vinyl and all that stuff, the aesthetic is just so pleasing. I thought it was a dope idea to have this book. So talk a little bit about um, you know, the design of the book, the idea behind it. Obviously, shout out who did the work.
Yeah, brother. So okay, I'm glad I get to shout this man out. This cover was designed by the same person who designed the 3 Feet High and Rising album cover. It was
Mm,
designed by Toby Mott. Toby Mott. So I talked to Toby really early on in the process of like at first he was going to be in the book. Um, and I think I still reference some stuff that he said. Like I interviewed him for the book, so I was already in touch with him. And I got to give credit to HarperCollins, Day Street in particular, a subsidiary of HarperCollins, who put out this book. My editor, Stuart Roberts, hit me one day and was just like, "Hey, what do you think about having Toby design the book cover? At least let's ask him." And Toby, to his credit, said yes. And
mm,
the middle image, the image that we have in the middle, we licensed. So that was me going through different options and
mhm,
saying, no, this one fits the best. And the halo around Dave's head was my idea. That was
mm.
me being like, no, I want to shout Dave out. But I also don't want to ignore, the elephant in the room.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So no, that was Toby. It was a combination, but it was more so Toby that did the design.
That's dope because that's one of the things I noticed where I like the touch of the halo because, like you said, it's the elephant in the room, but it's in the same playful, almost uh as far as the aesthetic and the way we kind of grown to love De La Soul. So when I see that, I don't get sad. I'm kind of happy like he's still here. His legacy lives on, and even though we're acknowledging, the what's basically happened in recent years. So
No,
yeah,
we
man,
love Dave, man.
it's really yeah. Truth be told, he was my favorite out the group as far
Hmm.
as like who I could relate to, rhyming wise. Um, so this book is out, what I'm saying? You're getting a lot of attention for it, but you are a writer and you a deep thinker because that's what writers are. What's next for you? Like is it another hip hop book? And more importantly, because you touched on it, I also wanted to shout out or at least get your perspective on writers today and going forward, specifically Black writers.
Okay, so I'll answer the what's next question first. And Shoot, you about to get some breaking news, brother. I
That's
haven't
why
said
I
this
wrote it
publicly.
down, brother. That's what.
There you go. Hey, man, record it, whatever, screenshot, screen record.
Right.
But so no, I'm already working on my next book, man.
Okay.
It's a personal book. It's about grief and music.
Mm,
So what I'm doing, and I also reference this in the book. The epilogue also is a shout out to my mother,
mm,
who passed away while I was finishing the book. She passed away last August, August 22nd, 2023.
mm,
And I noticed in the wake of that, I would play certain songs and I would still like see her.
mm,
It's weird, not to sound too weird, but it's like I'd play songs like Stevie Wonder's Ordinary Pain and just remember how she would go crazy for that song. Or I'd play James Blake's Retrograde and just remember how like when she picked me up from the train station, how she would just have it like at some crazy volume, just playing it.
mm,
Um, so what I'm doing, I'm writing a book about me and my mom's relationship through music, but
mm,
it's written from the perspective of me writing a letter to her wherever she is now, pretty much thanking her, reminding myself of our memories through music. And it goes from when I'm a kid and she's playing Stevie Wonder and I'm just looking up like, wow, okay, Stevie's cool, Elton John is cool. But then it also transitions to when she gets older and I'm putting her on the music. I'm putting her on to Most Def's Black on Both Sides. I'm putting her on to Bon Iver and James Blake. So that's the next book, man. And that's coming out through Atria, Simon and Schuster, and that's the same company that put out the Kendrick Lamar book. So I'm going back to Atria to do that book. And then there's another book after that that I'm already working on that I can't talk about yet, but it's lit.
Okay. Okay. I mean,
It's
you gave a lot more than I was expecting. That's why I had another question. But you know,
lit. But yeah, and then Black writers. Black I feel like look, I feel like every so often, when a music publication either shuts down or they lay people off, we all tend to think that the sky is falling. We all tend to think that, oh my God, what are we gonna do next? Where are we gonna go? Where are we gonna write? But I always am on the other side, and I'm like, Black writers have been making a way out of no way forever.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? That's just kind of what we do. And so I don't know if it's naive or not, but I always feel like great writing, good to great writing will always, always, always stand the test of time. And it will always keep your name buzzing. So I feel like as long as Black writers, as long as writers in general, but more so Black writers, as long as we remain curious, as
mm,
long as we, again, dare to be different, as long as we remain steadfast in what we believe in and what we want to write about, we're going to be just fine because we always have been. And that's not to say that we have to rely upon any sort of publication to come save us. We don't need saving. We popping regardless. So the Black writers that I know, we're gonna be good. We're
mm,
fine, and I feel like the future is bright because they are some writing ass people, and they're just gonna keep writing, and therefore their work is just gonna keep on keeping on forever and ever.
mm. The book is High and Rising, a book about De La Soul. The author is Marcus J. Moore. Brother, I appreciate you spending the time with us on this podcast, talking about yourself, talking about the state of hip hop, De La Soul, and everything else, man. And obviously, I want people to visit your website, which is still your website. I hope so. MarcusJMoore.media.
That's it.
There you go. Which the links will be in the description of this episode. You can check out his work, what he's up to. Obviously, you can go out and get the book, and I implore you, go out and get the book. Go read it for yourself. It's a great book. And also, if people want to follow you online, social media, where could they keep up with you?
The best place right now is Instagram, and my handle there is underscore Marcus J Moore. And then I'm kind of sort of on Twitter, but in there it's at Marcus J Moore straight up, no underscore. So those are the two best places to find me right now.
All right, sounds good, man. Thanks again for coming through, spending some time with us. For those of you watching, if you like the content, again, subscribe, like, share with people you know, and more importantly, as Mark has already said it throughout here, but y'all know my slogan, we are not critics, we are fans. Peace.
McLovin.